I've titled this Going to Paris. I had woken up that morning feeling less than refreshed. The night had passed by slowly at first and painfully slower as the night went on. I had been awake for most of the night, whether something startled me or I just stayed restless. I wasn't exactly nervous, but I didn't feel like Superman either. I was going away for a while. I was going to Paris, but it would never be the same when I made it back again. Who would think I was going to do this today and at the age of 19? It started for me several months prior to high school graduation. I made a choice to go and talk to him and see what it was like. I made up my mind that I was going to do this, and explaining to my parents why I had chosen the toughest branch was just the beginning of a long and painful experience. Mom, Dad, you know how both your fathers served during World War II? I asked. Yes, son, said my father. My mother had a scared look in her eyes that I cannot forget. Well, I'm going to enlist, and I want your blessing. What branch? Mom was taking over the conversation. I said, I talked to a recruiter, and I've chosen the United States Marine Corps. Mom started crying. Dad put one hand on her shoulder and said, everything will be all right, Beth. And he put his other hand on mine. What I hadn't known was all the stories they had heard about the war their fathers were in. Why the Marines? Dad asked. I said, well, they train longer and harder and work differently than the Army does. I told them I wanted to try out for the President's own first, and if that didn't work, I assured them I would keep my head straight in whatever MOS I chose. Dad said, we're going to have a talk before you decide for sure what you do. That night, Dad told me about how Granddaddy was a paratrooper and an MP, and that he flew into Korea. But the war ended by the time he had arrived. He never had to see combat, but was prepared to make the jump, if he had to, of course. He told me why Mom seemed so upset later that evening. Her father, my papa, was a sergeant in the Army and was actually in England when the Blitzkrieg was carried out by the Luftwaffe. He was there for days after, clearing away rubble and pieces of human beings from the aftermath. Papa had gotten what we now call PTSD. Then it was named shell shock, but what happened is he found a baby boy that was no more than a couple of months old. He had just held that little baby and cried. He refused to let it go. He would spend 2 days at a hospital after that, experiencing only to later in the war be injured by shrapnel from a British tank hit by a Panzerfaust. He returned home with a Purple Heart and received his honorable discharge at the end of the war. Though I hadn't heard all of that story before, it didn't sway my opinion. I knew war was horrible, but at the same time, I knew it was my duty to take the fight to the enemy. I was a shepherd, not a sheep. I was going to do my sworn duty and fight off the wolves. I left home just a few short weeks from that night. There was no pomp and circumstance. There were no parades, there were no fireworks or bands playing, military marches, or anything like that when I left home. It was all sort of surreal. I was going, they were staying, and neither them nor I knew what we were in for. The day I arrived in Nashville was a beautiful day, minus the traffic. My recruiter, Staff Sergeant Noss, had taken me as far as Huntsville, where I would meet up with the other poolies and drive the rest of the way. There were 3 of us total from North Alabama that day. We arrived at the Millennium Maxwell House and carried in our luggage. Now, the term luggage is probably exaggerated. We were told to take a change of clothes, to either a button-down shirt and khaki pants with a belt, or to wear a polo shirt and khaki pants. The clothes we rode down in were going to be thrown away the very next day. And the next day, in fact, was the start of it all. A day filled with paperwork, cold sandwiches, and water. We wound up with more police at MEPS the day that we were on the same bus as us. They would end up being in the same platoon as I once we got to that stage at Parris. We all loaded up on the bus and took the 9-hour trip through to Savannah and on to South Carolina. I smoked my last cigarette just outside the gates of Beaufort. One guy decided to go AWOL right then and cowered out. He went to the bathroom and never showed again. When we pulled to the gate, the headlights shone on a red brick wall, one that was a large plaque that read Marine Corps Recruit Depot, South Carolina, in yellow on a red background. There was a corporal at the gate holding a shotgun. He told us we were to put our heads between our knees and we were to close our eyes and shut our mouths. We were not to talk, we were not to try and look around. Throughout the twists and turns of the long ride through the swamps, we finally stopped. Through the darkness of our closed eyes and the blackness of the early morning hours, there was a bright light that shone through the darkness. The interior lights had been turned on. Then the door came open, and in came something both famous and infamous. It was a Marine Corps drill instructor. "Sit up straight and get your eyes on me." A voice that boomed from the depths of hell roared throughout the bus in a commanding way, such a way that you dare not utter a word or make an action in any defiance of the commands given. He was tall, lean, and muscular. His voice raspy from the scar tissue on his vocal cords from a life of screaming at recruits. "You are now aboard Marine Corps Recruit Depot, South Carolina. The first and last words coming from your holes will be 'sir.' Is that understood?" We sounded in close unison. "Yes, sir." "You will gather all your personal effects and get off my bus. You will not leave anything you brought with you on my bus. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." "Get off my bus and line up on my yellow footprints." "Yes, sir." We exited quickly. The night air was heavy and smelled of the ocean, and a pungent odor coming from what we would find was the fear of other recruits. Most people don't know this, but when there are large numbers of people in place, you can smell their fear. We got into a pair of yellow footprints. Mine were on the first column and the 8th row back. Oh no, I was on the outside and direct access of one of them. We were then told we would not be speaking in first person any longer while we were on Parris Island. Until we became Marines, it was to be this recruit, that recruit, these recruits, those recruits. We didn't realize then, but that was the first step in taking away our individuality. We turned to enter a large receiving building that was to our right. There were 2 large steel doors that shined like diamonds in the night. On each of them were 2 great polished brass seals of the Marine Corps. Above the door was a phrase that was the opening of our receiving speech by the receiving drill instructor. Through these portals, past prospects for America's finest fighting force, United States Marines. Once inside, we were met by a torrent of drill instructors. Initially, we were separated by sex, and then afterward, we were directed to boxes with plexiglass tops and sides with mirrors in the underside. They were checking us for flat feet. The next thing I knew, we were standing in line at phones. "You will dial your home number, and you will speak to someone there. You will not hold a conversation with them. You will read from the card on the door to the phone box. Is that understood?" We answered as we were conditioned to answer. One by one, in each line, we moved forward to the 16 phones. One at a time, we stepped past and forward past this yellow line and dialed a number as we were told to do so. After a few moments, it was my turn to step up to the phone and dial the number as I was told to. No matter how much I wanted to tell my mother on the other end of the phone how much I was going to miss them or how much that I loved them. I had seen one recruit try that, and a swarm of 3 instructors came running over. They slammed the phone on the hook and then proceeded to make an example of the recruit on why you will follow orders and you will not defy them, or else. Well, you get the idea. I step up, I dial, and I wait. After a few rings, there came a voice on the other end. The voice of my mother, awakened at 2 in the morning, says, "Hello." So I read the card. Dialing instructions. Dial the area code, then dial the number. You will say the following. 1. This is recruit, last name. 2. I have arrived safely at Parris Island. 3. Please do not send food or bulky items to me in the mail. 4. I will contact you in 7 to 9 days by letter with my new address. 5. Thank you for your support. Goodbye for now. That would be the last time I heard their voices for some time. We were kept away for about 3 days straight. We had gotten our heads shaved to the scalp by very speedy barbers with burning hot and dull clippers that created furrows in our scalps. The click-clack of the clippers would be remembered in the cadence we would run to in the future. The following days were filled with no food, dental appointments, receiving of gear, uniforms, and acquisition of a rifle. I carried my rifle and my gear to the squad bay. I met my senior drill instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Ekman, and his drill instructors, Sergeant Taylor, Sergeant Ramirez, and Sergeant Smith. 4 men that would shape me into a Marine. Men who would teach me to kill and to never question. Men who would teach me how the Corps was made, how it works, and how we will destroy our enemy and preserve our country. With strict discipline and painful reminders, we will be made into Marines. To give you an idea of what it's like on Parris Island, some say it's so hot that the devil himself came to collect souls and left to find ice water. There are snakes, alligators, spiders, ants, wasps, hornets, enough mosquitoes for the entire planet, and the infamous sand flea. It had some of the most beautiful landscapes and sunrises I had ever seen. Day 1 of PT consisted of a 1.5 mile run. We ran down what was called Farm Road. We started on an asphalt and then ran on a sandy trail through the woods and swamps. We started in the early morning before sunup, while it was still a nice, cool 96 degrees with what had to be 110% humidity. Along the way there were already recruits passing out from the heat and from exhaustion and the lack of sleep. I had already pulled 3 hours of fire watch and road guard duty to start the morning. I was exhausted too. We came to another recruit in a traffic cone. He was yelling 1.5 mile, turn around, 3 miles, keep going. On the way back from the halfway point, I saw a recruit fall from exhaustion. The truck, the corpsman picked him up and headed back to the PT area. I finished my run with only a minute remaining. I wasn't nearly in good enough shape to be here, I thought to myself. I did my pull-ups next. I pulled out 5 and got off the bar. I was so far on my way to making the cut. Next were sit-ups. I was second to go from the 2-man teams we were split into. The first guy couldn't cut the mustard. He could do more than 15 of his required 30 sit-ups. He failed his entry-level PT test because of my honesty. I reported his score as a 15, which on a pass-fail test failed him immediately. I completed the test and we cycled back to our squad base. He cycled to PCP, the Physical Conditioning Platoon, what was commonly referred to the Fatty Patty. He was going to the hardest PT battalion on Parris Island other than 3rd Battalion. And the way that it's said is that 1st Battalion makes men, 2nd Battalion makes Marines, and 3rd Battalion makes machines. My first day in 1st Battalion Delta Company, Platoon 1093, was one hell of a day. We scrambled to meet every demand, we ran our guts out and worked our asses off. It was not what any of us had expected. We were in the hands of the devil himself and he wore a campaign cover. One guy quoted Full Metal Jacket, and let's just say, the drill instructors were not impressed. He did not get the nickname of Joker like in the movie, and he did not have many friends because we were all punished as a whole. That's the way it works. If one guy screws up, everybody screws up. It's supposed to prepare you for combat. If one guy screws up there, it can cost his life and the lives of those around him. Having your head on a swivel will save your ass, as we had been told. After a few weeks, we started falling into the groove of things. We had started earning the respect of our drill instructors for our progress made. There was less yelling and more instruction. By the time we made it to the gas chambers, we were having fun. Grass Week, or marksmanship training and qualification, was the best of all. We stayed at Weapons Battalion and only had weapons instructors around us. We joked and had fun. On the day our instructors came back was the final day of Grass Week. We were sending rounds down range when a feral cat was bolting across the range. One of the senior drill instructors yelled, "First one to hit it gets a Big Mac." A barrage of hot lead and 5.56 millimeter began in the direction of Garfield the cat. The mass of orange tabby soon rolled end over end in the dust and grass and pink mist that seemed to float and hang in the air for mere seconds. It was over, and some recruit had just gotten his first confirmed kill with an M16A2 rifle. That recruit was not me. However, I would gain special treatment for the entire platoon not a week later. There were some recruits that just couldn't hack the environment and subsequently thought of self-harm or a little pity party to see if medical would send them home. When someone goes AWOL, then a search party is formed. We weren't far from graduation, and most of us were motivated. Every now and then, one person just tries to get away for whatever reason. This sort of behavior is generally uncommon among recruits. However, there was a recruit who refused to train on September 11, 2006. He, like the other washouts, were never thought highly of. This particular recruit was found the next morning stuck in slough mud. Now, slough mud is this wonderful thing on Parris Island. It's similar to quicksand, but creates suction when you enter it. This guy had been stuck in the sand in a standing position all night long. It was November, and the nights were cold enough to cause hypothermia. He was a victim to it, and it ended up with brain damage from his attempt. Not everybody makes it off the island of Marine, but when you do, you're followed in the footsteps of men and women who've been giving enemies the opportunity to die for their country since 1775. A Marine is the best friend you can have and the worst enemy you can have at the same time. We're called leathernecks, devil dogs, jarheads, and even infidels. I'm proud to be one of the few. I fought to get where I am today. I've sweated, I've cried, and I've bled. I became a Marine, and the process of my training has been ingrained into my very being. I will forever remember my experiences, and I think of them daily. I think of how I have changed for the most part, and that change has been for the better. Thank you.